Hi everyone, thank you so much for joining another LeadSquared webinar. I have a very special guest with me who is our main speaker for the day. But before we get into that, I want to just take you through what we will learn today. So it's all about storytelling and omni-channel marketing, essentially how to leverage storytelling for omni-channel marketing. We will cover a few things in this session, which basically includes a little bit on the structure of the story. What are the key elements that one should focus on or include? How do we really harness the power of storytelling? We all know that as people we love we love hearing stories, right? Facts are there, and then there are speeches, but when you have a story and all of that, it makes such a big difference. And we will also talk about some of the tools possibly that are enabling us to really harness the power of storytelling. In the audience, I do see a lot of familiar faces. So thank you so much for coming back. Now I will go into our speaker. Hey, hi, Joel. Thanks so much for joining us. Uh,
I
a quick intro about Joel. So he is a writer, digital marketing professional, and a TEDx speaker. Currently, he is marketing Nika. So, Joel, if I've missed anything, if there's any interesting tidbit that you'd like the audience to know, please share with us.
no, I think that's the shortest and the nicest introduction I've seen. It's usually these long paragraphs, but it's nice. But yeah, it's nice to be here on a Friday afternoon. I should
Right
get this.
afternoon, yeah.
But yes, thanks for having me.
Thank you so much, Joel, for joining us. So, a quick note to the audience. So, we want this to be an interactive session. You have questions, even if you think it's silly, just put it out there. We want to have a conversation and really learn from each other. So, Joel, I can tell you, has planned a host of different things to show us. So, that's one. But I think before we really get into what Joel has to show, I'll probably start with a few questions for Joel. So, Joel, of course, we know that storytelling is something that all organizations should leverage in some way or the other. But if you had to just start and tell us, are there any organizations that are really a class apart, that have really taken storytelling to another level?
I mean, before I jump into that, I mean, it's nice to go back as to where this sort of came into place. So I
Yeah.
come from advertising. I used to work in advertising before I moved on to the brand side, and came to the other side when I now sit at the other end and approve versus at the other end where I used to wait for approval. But there used to be always when you'd have brands which you would pitch for, or you'd have brands who you would sort of try to create something for, and whether that was anything from like social posts to like digital videos or now reels. But back in the day, just it was limited to videos which were longer formats. uh, a lot of times when you would create and take something to the brand, right, you slowly started noticing this pattern with a lot of brands where they would go through something, whether it was, and especially when it was like a script of something that you would add, and they would always pick out that one element, and they would always have this one statement which they would keep reiterating and say, okay, it's missing the storytelling aspect. We need some sort of storytelling as part of it, right? And I think it's been a lot of legacy brands have held it on for the longest time because they keep doing it. It's slowly now seeped into and got into a lot of brands, because now every brand at the end of the day, as wants to have that sort of story attached to whatever they're putting out there. They don't want it to just be a surface level ad, right? Because knowingly unknowingly, a story always tries to subvert the whole aspect of trying to make it very adsy, right? If you have to put it in quotes, right? And brands over the years have done it, right? You take your Fevicol, which is some of the best advertising you've ever seen, right? Because you take the older ads that they've done, and they've done ads which are obviously rooted in consumer insights, because they spoke to a certain section of the audience, and because they had to speak to that certain section of the audience, they didn't want to make it very adsy, right? So everything that they did was rooted in a story, right? Whether you take this ad which Fevicol did a couple of years back, which was for this sofa, which traveled through generations, and it was an entire film, and I don't know if anyone has seen over here, but it was an ad, right? So Fevicol has had the legacy of doing ads which are very memorable in time, right? And over the years, you see brands have taken that same aspect and tweaked it and changed it, and now diversified it across channels as well, right? So it's not no longer restricted only to doing a 1 minute YouTube video where you're trying to put something and sell something out there, but it's translated in the reels that they do. It's translated in the social content that they do, and there are a couple of brands now which do it very well, right? I mean, if
Mhm.
at the top of my head, which I have to sort of recollect and talk about, Zomato does it really well, and they have a really strong creative team, and you can see it in the work that they do, because it sort of is rooted in an insight, and not everything is just told the way it is, right? Everything is sort of has some sort of narrative attached to every piece that they do. Swiggy also somewhere down the line does it. Cred did it very interestingly when they did the ads that happened, because they rely very heavily on trying to make the advertising interesting enough, because the product is also
You like their
it has to
actors.
be, yeah,
Yeah,
it also
yeah.
has to be very, it has to be simplified to a sense to make people understand it, and you have a 15, 20, 30 second window to tell everything you have to tell about the product. So the while the product window will appear only in the end, the
Mhm.
first 20 seconds is how you can catch people's attention, if you had to sort of say it, and that only can happen if the story is interesting enough, right? So there are brands who are doing it. Prime, Bumble does it very interestingly. If you see their social handle also, a lot of the text content that they create sort of has some sort of story attached to it. um, and yeah, I mean, these are the brands that at least come at the top of my head, because they're always getting featured somewhere or the other, and everyone sort of at least talking about them in every social post, or they built that legacy over time, which is now translated, and now it allows them to explore a lot more. So at least I think these are the brands that come to my head now when I think of at least who's doing stories well. But even if I had to take those aside, right? If you take a lot of the legacy brands, like you have your Cadbury Dairy Milk, and if you have
Yeah.
these a lot of the Pidilite brands, right? They very heavily relied on storytelling as an aspect, which is now, if you see a lot of the advertising that comes out now, also when they do certain brand level films, it's very focused on not just selling the product, but also making the product a very integral part of the entire story. So yeah.
Okay. So when we discuss some of the brands doing reels nowadays. How important is the channel consistency when it comes to storytelling? So for some brands, let's say LinkedIn is up and is really works better than most other channels, right? Like let's say for B2B organizations,
Right.
whereas for some other B2C companies, Instagram works better, or Facebook. So keeping that in mind, what sort of challenges do you think brands may come across, and how do you really overcome those?
See, again, right? I mean, it depends on the audience you're at the end of the talking to, right? When it comes to B2B, obviously, there are certain channels which are more receptible to that kind of advertising, which might be LinkedIn in some cases, which might be emailers in some cases. In those cases, your Instagram reels are primarily used for awareness and education. So it depends on how interesting you can sort of make the content that you do. Like, I'll give you an example, right? There's a there's an Instagram handle called Let's Droom, okay, on when they keep doing content around like, say, I think secondhand cars or used cars as such.
Okay.
uh, None of the content that they do on their entire Instagram handle is related to what they actually sell, right? Because their content is entirely focused on office sketches and skits. If you went to their page, you'd never know what exactly their proposition is in terms of what they're selling. The other day, I came across this Instagram page for this Rajshahi restaurant, which actually has this very signature butter naan dish that they keep talking about. It's an Instagram handle. Their entire Instagram page is just filled with random memes, right? And memes in which they try to do the plugin. Brands have found interesting ways to sort of talk to audiences, right? But again, when it comes to B2B, you have to know at the end of the day what your objective is. If your
Yeah.
objective is awareness and education, you might as well run, and conversions, you might as well run performance ads, or you might as well run Insta story ads where you can get people to sort of at least click and convert and come to your site. If it's again only awareness, then you might want to create interesting content around the services that you offer, right? And which is why I think also people choose to partner with like influencers to do that, right? Because they try and see how influencers can bring that in. And in time with challenges also, will a lot of times brands come across the biggest challenge, saying that, okay, fine, is this going to get me conversion? But again, right, when you're doing reels, the main motive can never be conversion, right?
Ex-
Because it always has to be awareness and engagement, right? Because you cannot expect people to sort of purchase, because there's no link to drive people there, right? Unless you're running it as a dark ad, or you're boosting it on the side uh, as a dark post where you can get people to sort of come in. So you have to understand that every platform has certain limitations, and understand if your audience is on a certain platform, you rather advertise there, and the objective has to be very clear in terms of what you're doing. So I think that is very hard to sort of and very important to come to terms with before you sort of run any sort of campaign or create any sort of content. So yeah.
okay. And what do you think is really the fine line between, so of course, like you said, right, a reel is not gonna give you a conversion straight away, not at least what you want. So where, how do you find that balance? What is that line that you should see? So what should one expect from, let's say, storytelling ads or creatives, whatever you want to call it, versus direct product pitches or service pitches or whatever? Yeah.
Yeah, again, let's see. And this comes with a double-edged sword, right? Is because when you talk of there are two, there are a bunch of objectives when you create a film also, right? There's brand love, which you want to increase, which is a pure plug brand film, in which case your product integration might be very seamless as part of it. You're not upselling it directly. And then there are films that you create only for the perspective of getting people to click and go and make that purchase, right? Both of these things can have a sort of storytelling aspect to it. They might not necessarily have a whole narrative structure where you see the characters doing something, something, something. The ones which directly want you to sort of go and click and achieve something might directly hammer to the points, right? So the characters might be mouthing the CTAs, or they might be calling out directly what needs to be done or what the service offers directly as part of it. The setting and the story you build around it then becomes integral, right? Like if you have in, like, for example, if I have to tell you, like this delicious ad which recently they did for Father's Day. Okay, now
Mhm.
Licious again is a platform which sells cold meats, right? It sells you pre-packaged cold meats, right? What can they do for Father's Day, right? And how can they bring in their brand as an integral part of it, right? So they actually showed three fathers talking about how they had a weekend ritual of going and purchasing mutton from shops, which is normal, right? A lot of
Yeah.
dads who consume non-veg in households do that, right? And how they've lost that thing because dishes is now coming to play, right? There again, you've used the same people who have, who have sort of feel distant because of the brand to talk about your brand, right? And in the end, the fathers come in, they sort of say, like, I really like delicious meat and stuff like that. They're calling it out, right? But the entire device used to tell that story becomes interesting because you approached it using an interesting insight, right? So how you package it at the end of the day is very important. You might have seen a lot of, if you're ever on YouTube, right, you'll notice there are some performance driven ads which come, right, which have only text as part of them, right? You have a bunch of visuals, you have like 2-3 lines attached to it, and you have an end CTA where they're like, go and purchase this product, right? You take it for it, you take it for fashion, you take it for beauty, you take it for lifestyle segments, right? And even if you read the lines one after the other, they open with an insight, right? They always open with saying, they'll always open with a question, right? And for example, saying, uh, are you missing the glow, or is your skin feeling dull enough? Then here's the solution for it, right? There also they're forming like almost sort of a structure, right, which follows the ideals of sort of telling a story, which is opening with something interesting, having a middle, and then placing finally a product at the end as a solution, right? So as part of everything, if you see, the narrative structure always comes into place, no matter what a brand you sort of look at, and brands are now consciously choosing to do that versus rather just calling out their USPs as part of an ad and just selling them, because that doesn't work anymore, right? Consumers need to feel connected in some way with the brand, which is why it becomes interesting to sort of pick an insight from their life and storify it in some way, so that they feel more connected to it. So yeah.
Yeah. I think also I will admit that I think it's slightly harder to do in the case of B2B, or maybe,
Yeah.
yeah, we just have to think harder, but it is slightly
Yeah.
harder to find that
Yeah.
connection. Yeah.
Exactly. Right. Like for example, right? I mean, if you see a lot of B2B, and I'll take the example of people who sell courses online, right? They always open with a problem, right? If you see, you must have seen Ankur Warikoo, and you must have seen a bunch
Yeah.
of people how
They
they sell
always
their
work on
courses, right?
LinkedIn. Yes.
They're always popping up on LinkedIn, right? And if you engage with them on LinkedIn, or if you come across, they'll also retarget you on Instagram, right? So if you're probably scrolling through a bunch of stories, you will somewhere come across. And now, like for example, Chat GPT is big right now, right?
Yeah.
Like a bunch of people are doing courses on Chat GPT, and they actually want to, they'll open with a line with saying that, like, don't make sure Chat GPT takes away your job, make it a part of your job, right? That's a hook line you open with, right? So that's almost like a problem deep diving into an insight, then giving you an in-depth sort of gist of saying what the workshop is going to be, saying that, we're going to teach you this, we're going to teach you that. These many people have already learned it from this course, and it has already helped them in their work. Now you can choose to be a part of this course as well, and make it your own. So they're talking to their B2B quote unquote consumers in that way, where they're sort of reaching out to them in the language they speak, providing a solution for the problems that exist in the industry, right? And that field is very important, right? If you pick the industry and you pick the biggest problems as part of it, you can actually solve for it. Like if you take if you ever register as a seller on any e-commerce platform, and you're talking to people who are probably direct B2B, right? Because these are sellers who are coming to sell and list their products as catalogs on your e-commerce platform, right? If you go through the entire videos that are created for the onboarding for them, it's made in a story format, so it's easy for them to understand, right? So they will actually say ki this seller's name is Ramesh. Ramesh has recently opened up uh, a soap business, and Ramesh wants to register a soap business somewhere. Now steps in A, this particular company. We are here to help you to sort of reach your, Ramesh tried selling these products to people around him by going from shop to shop and selling them, but was not able to help convert anything much out of it. His income was relatively less, and he was spending a lot more money creating the products versus actually selling them, right? This is
Yeah.
the problem. So saying in steps in a company, we are here to help you make sure that you reach a larger audience base and you can come out. They will use animation, they will use characters, they will use illustrations to create this entire video. So that people who are watching this know that the value that this company or this e-commerce platform is going to add to them, right? And that's also storified because you have to talk to people in the language they understand, right? You will see it's not just in English, you'll see them in multiple languages as well, right? And that becomes important, right? Is that if you're talking to people, especially B2B consumers, you have to show them what value you're bringing as part of it. And if you show them in an interesting way, if you show them in a way that helps them solve a problem that they have or an existing problem that they have, they're all in, right? It comes to marketing again, reaching them becomes a tricky space, which is why you use different channels. You'd not use the traditional reels and stuff like that because conversions won't really happen there. But
Yeah.
you'd rather use emailers, you'd rather use LinkedIn, you'd rather use those kind of platforms where they are already existent, right? So you can probably reach out to them over there.
Yeah, pretty much
Sorry.
that's what we use also. Just email, LinkedIn, and I think when it comes to B2B, like you said, storytelling. So video is probably a channel that a lot of
Yeah.
marketers can opt for.
Yeah.
Yeah. Speaking of videos, I do know you have several that you would like to show us, Joel. So yeah,
Yeah, there are several. I don't know how many we're going to be able to cover, but again, I mean, do you want me to pull that deck up and show? Show me this
sure.
cast it. Just give me a minute. Oh, great! It's showing. Is it showing? To you
Yes,
guys?
is there?
Oh, it's showing. Is it? It's not showing for me.
Is it not? It's showing for us.
It's showing, right? It's showing. Can you see the first slide? Is
Yes.
it showing?
Yeah, yeah. It's there for
Okay,
us.
great.
Yeah.
Yeah, great, great. Okay, great. So again, I mean, since we talked story, we talked everything, it always becomes easy to sort of talk about it in context to advertising and content, especially in terms of what people do, right? So if you've read any book, if you've read any any short story over time, if you've watched a film, if you've watched a show, every story in its essence is always divided into three parts, right? You have the beginning, you have where you introduce the characters, you tell set context as to where it's happening, you provide a setting, you tell you tell the people who are consuming the story who these people are who you're watching. You have the middle in which you have a whole bunch of things happening, right? You show the characters going through different journeys. They're probably setting out to look for something. They're probably trying to achieve something in life, and that's your middle, right? And you finally have your crescendo or your end, right, which is the high point in terms of the character's life, right, where there's a change that happens in terms of the character. That character probably changes for good or for bad. Something happens that changes the character's life completely towards the end, which transform them from what they were to what they become, right? So when you started with them from the beginning, they're at point A, and by the time you reach the crescendo at the end, it becomes point B. Now, crescendos are usually the highest point in the story. It's the most dramatic or the most emotional part of a story, right? Which is something's really drastic happening in that moment. And then you finally have the end where everything comes together. The same principles, if you apply in terms of content, right? When it comes to storytelling, if you pick out any ad which has done storytelling interestingly, you will notice the same pattern sort of following, disjointed pattern following across the board, right? Where you have your beginning, where you set the context of who these characters are, what they're doing. You'll just see a glimpse of them, right? And you can automatically make sense, right? It might be a couple, it might be a father in a household, it might be someone who's trying to, like say, wake up in the morning and prepare for a marathon, right? You see the context right at the start. Your middle actually explores the insight even further, right? Which is what are the things that are driving this character to actually use your product or service, right? Which is, say, for instance, you probably have this person who's wake up and like you take the Bonvita ads, right? You have this mom training her child, and she notices how he's, she's pushing him, she's pushing him to do better and better, and how in the course of it you realize the child is obviously reaching a breaking point but pushing further and further and further and further, right? And you finally have your crescendo or your end, right? And in advertising parlance, in marketing parlance, we call it the penny drop moment, which is basically that main, hook in the film where, you realize that you probably reveal your product or service, or you reveal that main twist in the film, which brings the consumer to understand, okay, fine, this is how it's all coming together in the end, right? So if you see any piece of content, and this is a structure, obviously it's a free flowing structure. It changes slightly when you see content that's happening on, and statics of content that's happening on reels, where the storytelling, is now completely condensed into a different format. But if you take a lot of the videos done, or you take a lot of the ads done over time, you'll notice the structure sort of leans in very seamlessly over there. So this is, it's important to understand this before so whenever you look at a piece of content online now, you can always look at it from the lens of saying, okay, fine, okay, here's how the ad starts, here's what's happening in the middle, and here's the penny drop moment in the end, right? And how it comes together. So if you notice that, you notice how the storytelling flows as part of it, right? Because that's uh, present across the board throughout, no matter what video you're trying to watch. So yeah, this is primarily the structure, which is sort of thing. uh, so yeah,
Sure. Thank you.
talked a lot, but yeah.
No, no, that's fine. That's fine.
Okay. Do you want me to move to the next?
Sure, please do. Yeah.
So, yeah. So I mean, again, right, when it comes to storytelling, also you people for over the years have seen it. Huh?
I will actually share it from my screen because the size is too small here.
Yeah, 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 no problem. You share
Just
it with
give
us.
me a
I'll
sec.
stop sharing. I'll
Let
stop
me
sharing
just,
one second.
pull it up from here. There you go. Yeah. Are you able to view it?
Not yet.
Oh, because it is showing. If someone in the audience can tell us if you can see this or not, because it's
Yeah,
very
this is going to
clear.
be our first interaction with the audience. Tell us if you can see this or not. I can't see it. Everybody else can see it,
No,
but
no.
yeah.
So the way I look at it, it's like even webinars are like school. Okay, in a classroom where everyone is waiting for that first person to ask the question, and then everyone else
Yeah.
starts asking questions. That's how it is.
God. I've always realized that it's nicer when it's not like a classroom setting, because then
Yeah,
everybody, because to be very honest, a lot of the lectures end up getting boring when two people are talking at one place, because you're just looking at them and you're like, when will you guys stop talking so we can get back to our lives? But yeah, hopefully we won't bore people with this. But yeah, I can't see, Shivani, by the way, just saying.
okay, I don't know. Do you want to? I think please just refresh your screen. Give that a shot, and
Oh,
then
refresh the screen. Okay, fine. I
yeah,
might
so
disconnect
you
though.
can see. Yeah, it's fine. You'll come back in 30
Okay,
seconds.
okay.
In the meantime, if anybody in the audience wants to tell us where they work or what their role is, feel free to share that because we're all here to learn and just gather as many insights as possible. If you want Joel to specifically talk about something, now would be the time as well. So please put that on the chat. Any good,
Great. We
Joel?
can see it. We can see it now. Great.
Awesome. Great. Yeah.
Right. So again, when you talk storytelling, again, people always restrict it to videos because it's the easiest way to sort of look at it. Because there's obviously a visual form happening in front of them. But brands have gotten very innovative over the years in terms of how they use content to tell stories also,
Hmm.
and not just moving pictures, right? How you can use statics, how you can use images to tell stories as well, right? For example, what I have actually in front of me right now, what you can see on your screens right now is something that Swiggy has done very recently, actually. And it's very interesting to see how they've used Twitter content and replies to actually tell a story. So if you see the first image in itself, you see someone had actually written to Shah Rukh Khan very, and I know celebrities keep getting this over and all, but it's obviously nice when a celebrity engages randomly with somebody, right? So this person who's there obviously asked Shah Rukh Khan if he has eaten food, right? And Shah Rukh Khan very seamlessly, I don't think this is paid because it clearly doesn't look paid, but he's very seamlessly just name dropped Swiggy as part of his reply, right? He says, "क्यों भाई आप Swiggy से हो भेज दोगे क्या?" And
Yeah.
that's Shah Rukh Khan in his cheeky self, right? Now, obviously, such a moment becomes very integral for Swiggy, right? Because they've gotten a free shout out, almost of sorts. Now, I don't think this is paid. If this is paid, well, genius, hats off to them. But since it was not, I'm assuming it's not paid.
Yeah.
You see a lot of people on Twitter, they love engaging, right? Eventually, when something like this happens, eventually you see the second slide, someone has tagged Swiggy and said Swiggy will take a screenshot of this and make an ad, almost setting it up, right? Saying, okay, fine, this is almost like the beginning of something else. The third slide says, hey, Swiggy, can you deliver in Mannat, Mumbai? Right? Again, a reply tagging Swiggy. In the fourth one, if you notice, Swiggy actually replies with a screenshot of all their delivery boys saying, हम स्विगी वाले हम सबका डिनर लेके आएंगे, right? And this entire thing is happening on Twitter, right? And this the last one says तुम लोग का जो दिन बन गया होगा, and Swiggy is posted a screenshot from Om Shanti Yoga with Shah Rukh Khan. This entire thing transpired on Twitter, but when put together in a carousel format, almost tells you from start to end what went through, right? It is how brands can actually leverage and tell a story through statics also, right? You've gotten the context from the first tweet, you've understood the resolution by the end tweet, right? The Swiggy might not have directly sent food to Shah Rukh Khan, obviously, but at the end of the day, you see how they've actually used a moment of name dropping as part of their content to create a story out of it on statics, right? And they used it to do it in a carousel. And carousels across the board, even if you noticed content across which happens from Prime Video, from different channels now, they have the leverage because they obviously talk about shows and they talk about movies. So it's easy to create that kind of content using that. But it obviously becomes difficult for someone like a brand which is not belonging to a category that's so easy to talk to about when it comes to stories, right? For example, there are certain categories that might not be very interesting to talk about, right? How do you find interesting conversations to have over there becomes again a challenge of sorts, right? um, if you go to the next slide also, uh, yes, in terms of content, and I pick static examples where to show you how it's not only restricted to like say videos as such, right?
Mhm.
On the left side, if you see, and this is a format that's usually it's trending a lot. When I used to work at my previous organization, Tiny Tiny Tales, TTT, or how people call it, we used to do a lot of these static uh, comic strips, right? Because comic strips have been something we've read since childhood, right?
Yes. Yeah.
It's the easiest form to tell a story, right? You have four panels, you have a bunch of dialogues, you have an interesting illustration, you've done the job. We used to partner with a lot of brands to integrate their brands as part of the stories to tell them. So everything from like a chocolate brand to like a sanitary pad could be told in these kind of stories because illustrations give you the leeway that actual moving pictures might sometimes not, right? It saves you on production. You don't have to shoot it, you know, go ahead and shoot it. You don't have to edit it. You don't have to piece it together. You don't have to check the music, nothing. You have one simple illustration. You can create the product as part of it also. And a lot of brands nowadays are moving to doing this form of storytelling also because it allows you to tell a story in a more heartwarming way also as possible in a very short format, right? While Instagram has moved again to reels and a lot of people are consuming reels, people still look for statics also, right? And they slowly tend to find that balance as well. Like which you see, if you see in the left side, the Zomato example also is for Mother's Day. It has four panels, right? It's the most common insight in terms of moms, right? Is if you ever visit a mom, you'll never go home hungry, right? It's
Yeah.
the most easiest insight, right? And they made a story out of it, right? Where you actually show the delivery boy. So the branding is on point, right? You've shown a mom, you've shown an insight, you've had four panels, and you have one line at the end tying it all, right? You'll notice a lot of brands using illustrations and to sort of tell the stories because it becomes an easier form to produce and create also, right? And obviously, if you have a strong illustration team and you have a strong design team, it's a very engaging format to do as well. Obviously, not continuously, but once in a while, it definitely works its charm. Screen grabs are another. I find this very interesting because if you see a lot of content pages also, and I feel film and music videos and shows, right? The easiest form to always market them is to tell the story that exists inside them, right? This one is from Kapoor and Sons. So I see some icons floating. Okay.
That's from the audience.
Okay. So if you see this from Kapoor and Sons, right? And see, a film or a show in itself is a long story. A lot of iconic scenes from that actually end up telling stories in themselves, right? This was actually done for Pride Month. So if you see in the first panel, you actually have Ratna Pataksha and Fawad Khan actually having this conversation, right? So it's just three lines, right?
Yeah.
And this actually what I've taken this screen grab was actually part of Carousel where they had done a lot of their films which actually had LGBTQ plus characters as part of the entire films and the shows that they've done. And this three panel is enough to tell you an entire story in itself, right? Because it connects with you in a certain way. It's easily shareable. The characters were fun, and people who watch the film obviously go back to that scene very instantaneously, right? So statics are also, if you use them interestingly, and you'll notice this with very famous shows, right? You take Family Man, you take Mirzapur, you take the biggest shows that release, right? Or you take big films when they release, right? You pick two iconic dialogues, three iconic dialogues from that, you mix them with some other show, and you can actually create a fun mix up collaboration between the both of them. For example, if you took one dialogue from Kapoor and Sons and you took one dialogue from Dil Dhadakne Do and you merged them together with one screen grab from one character on the top asking a question and one screen grab from another character from another film answering the question, you almost have created a story of sorts over there, right? Because
Yeah.
you've created an interaction within a static image over there, right? So again, comic strips, screen grabs become interesting ways to tell a story. Brands do it very interestingly on Insta stories as well. I could not find a bunch of examples, but if you notice, Netflix does a lot of storytelling via Insta stories, right? Where probably you have something happening on an Insta story. They will ask you to tap on the Insta story and it will probably lead you to another profile, right? You lead up to another profile. That profile has been specifically created only for this activity. It will have 3-4 images on that profile. You can probably go and interact with those images in a certain way and it will reveal something else, right? They had done it, I think, for Kaleidoscope or for some other show, for Money Heist, I think, back in the day, where you could
Okay.
interact with the Insta stories interestingly, and it took you through a journey almost, right? So it's not that you're just watching an Insta story; you're actually watching a story unfold even while through it. The last one is interesting because it's actually a push notification, right? It was done a couple of years back when Avengers Endgame, and it was a worldwide moment because Avengers Endgame and the Game of Thrones final episode were
Yeah,
premiering almost
yeah,
a
yeah.
week apart from each other. I think Insider captured it very nicely when they did it, and I'll read it out also. So the headline actually says, "What do we say to the god of work? Not today." Right, mixing up both Game of Thrones as well as Avengers Endgame. Don't spend your weekend in the crypt like Sansa. Head out to watch Avengers Endgame. Go for a live concert or catch a comedy gig with your friends. Book now. Right? Very seamlessly building it and making both worlds part of one push notification. Right? And if you see, um, and obviously it's not right to call them entirely storytelling because I think they use the principles of telling a story with a hook and grabbing you and taking you on some sort of small journey to cause delight. So I won't really say they're stories as such, but they're interesting way to tell content, right? Is to find that insight and see how you can mine it from a story perspective rather than just making it all about selling your product through it, right? Which is why if you see Dunzo will do a lot of puns, or certain brands will do a lot of puns on food, or they use pop culture references as part of it, right? Because it's easier for the audience to make that connection when it's part of it, right? If they use an iconic dialogue, you'll immediately connect with it, right? So this again, are some of the examples in terms of how statics sort of come into play. And obviously, brands keep innovating; they keep doing interesting things. I could pull out only a few examples to show, but yeah, this is static. So yeah, I've spoken too much, but yeah.
No, no, again, that's fine. And I know you've been speaking a lot, so I would like you to take a break. But for let's say beginners out there, who are just new to this, are there any specific tips you'd like to give in terms of what are the essential elements that need to be a part of a story, or what should one keep in mind when going about it?
Like I always tell this, and I tell this to the teams I work with. I tell this to the my friends who I meet, and we have conversations about content. Is that always the first, and it's gone from 5 to 3, but the first 3 seconds of your content, your piece of content is very important, right?
Yeah.
It's unfortunate due to dwindling attention spans that we can't spend too much of time with content nowadays because it's an endless scroll and you keep scrolling things. But whatever you're creating, right, it has to be looked from the lens of, are the first 3 seconds engaging enough to keep the consumer till the end of the video, right? So that's always something I tell people to do. And most of the times it can happen via hook, right? That hook can be anything from an action happening in the first 3 seconds, through a text overlay happening in the first 3 seconds, through setting up some context in the first 3 seconds, right? Or your brand appearing in the first 3 seconds, right? I mean, it all depends on that. So it or a transition happening in the first 3 seconds, right? And all these things add to how you build your piece of content, because with reels coming in and the format being itself conducive to short form storytelling, it all depends on how you open the video in the first 3 seconds so you can keep consumers to the end, right? Some videos might work because the face you might have in the video of the influencer or whoever you're working with might be more recognizable, so people might stay for longer. But if it's not, it also depends on what the content piece is, right? Because then are you providing some sort of education to the consumer? Are you providing some sort of benefit to the consumer through that piece? That becomes important as part of it. So I always feel that whatever you're creating, understand the end objective of it first, right? What is the reason of what you're doing it? Then look at format, look at trends that are happening on the internet, right? There are tons of trends online which if you see, lend themselves great to innovation, right? Because there's an audio track which can be interpreted in a whole different way. There's a transition which can be interpreted in a whole different way. There's a trend in which people doing certain things can be interpreted in a different way. You check couple reels, right? They're a big thing online, and it's relatable because couples all over the world feel the same, right? So intrusive thoughts, for an example, are a big thing, right? And which people don't speak about, but if you show it as part of it as actually happening, it becomes an interesting hook. So I always tell, like beginners who are stepping out, consume enough content so you know what's working. You don't need to replicate it exactly, but see how you can translate it to your business. See how your business fits and make it a part of it. I would rather you not do it than try to force fit it, right?
Yeah.
Because it's always important to understand that, see, at the end of the day, you might not be able to put your category as part of every piece of content that you do, but you might be able to put your consumer's life cycle, right? And this applies across the board, right? You might like some categories are like nascent and agnostic, so they apply easily to all pieces of content. Some categories might not, right? Like for example, finance might not be as easy to advertise about as food, which is why you find different ways to advertise for finance, right? You will not directly come in front of the camera and say, here's how you invest. You will probably show a conversation between a dad and his daughter, probably trying to, talk about mutual funds, right? And where the daughter's probably telling her dad about something new because the dad has always been managing finances, but now the daughter's going to manage the dad's finances, right? It's a flip in the story. So you look at those kind of insights. So you rather work inside and placing the consumer life first, and then get to the point of your category versus trying to just force fit your category as part of it. So yeah.
I because you were sharing examples, I remembered one example from LeadSquared itself. So it was this guy on LinkedIn who was reaching out to people at LeadSquared for a partnership. And what he did was, and you can see he shot a video of himself playing the piano and singing a song, and he somehow managed to include LeadSquared in that song and his company, and basically talk about the partnership. And hats off to that guy. I mean, that was a lot of effort. I don't know if he actually got in touch with him, but
I
that
hope
was,
you did.
I know, after all that effort, right? So
Yeah. No, but it is right. I mean, you see, the music also played an interesting part, right? Which is why you see people like Yashraj Mukhate and all became huge because they found interesting ways to talk and tell stories through music, right? If you see the kind of stuff that he created and did, it was very interesting, right? So the medium is always there. It's just how you integrate your brand as part of it. I feel.
sure, yeah.
Yeah.
Let's move on to the next example.
Yes. Which I forgot was the next slide, but yeah. Oh, great. Reels. Reels is great. And it's good. We're anyway talking about it, so we'll do it, right? So again, when it comes to Reels, also the rules of storytelling sort of go out of the window because you have that 3 second thing of grabbing attention. You have to set context and everything. But there are creators who really do it interestingly, right? Like you take creators who create comedy sketches and skits, right? They actually have, you know, they're very insight driven and very insight heavy, right? And they actually run very integral and very core to what the creators voices, but they also try to see how to make the brands interesting part of it. I have 3 examples over here to just sort of show you guys. The first one is actually from one of my favorite creators. Her name is Dharna Durga. She I
Good morning,
really
students.
Yeah, so I really love her content because I really follow it a lot, and she's really good because she really speaks the voice of the masses, right? A lot of her sketches and skits are really based on people you might have probably come across in your home, in your society, or in parks and places everywhere, right? The example that you could actually play right now was actually done for a Nika summer sale, which was done last month, I think. And notice how it goes from what it's talking about to the product integration, and check the insight and how relatable it is and how the story is flowing throughout it. So yeah, you can play it.
Good morning, students. आज हम बनाएंगे रोड का perspective. सब अपनी art file सिखाएंगे. Very good. Hold the brush on side for a thin line. Hold it flat for a thick line. Side for thin, flat for thick. Okay, class. क्लास सेटल डाउन. मैं समर ब्रेक का हॉलीडे होमवर्क बता रही हूँ. आशिमा, व्हाट इज दिस? राहुल को अपना पेड़ खुद बनाने दो. सब बच्चे अपनी आंख बंद करो और एक ब्यूटीफुल पिक्चर पेंट करो. तब तक चलो मैं ऑनलाइन शॉपिंग कर लेती हूँ. नायका की पिंक समर सेल जो शुरू हो गई है 5th से 12th में तक. आपने पेपर लिया, इसे लेफ्ट से फोल्ड करके, राइट से ट्विस्ट करके, साइड से बेंड करके अप रोल किया और ये बन गई आपकी बर्ड. मैम, यू आर सो ब्यूटीफुल. कैन वी पेंट यू? वेरी क्यूट आशिमा. वेल, इट्स बिकॉज ऑफ द आईलाइनर जो मैंने नायका से खरीदा. अच्छा, ये A3 नहीं, ये A4 साइज शीट है. अगर आप इसमें काम कर रहे हैं तो पेन ड्रॉप कर दें अपना. Oh, it's your birthday. Wishing your birthday as colorful as canvas filled with all your favorite shapes. No, बच्चे, this is HB pencil. और आप हमेशा मैथ्स की नोटबुक के पीछे क्यों काम करते हो? तो क्या हुआ अगर नोटबुक्स पे डिस्काउंट नहीं है? अब सब लोग नायका की समर सेल की तरह 100% ऑथेंटिक प्रोडक्ट्स पर, स्किन केयर, हेयर केयर, मेकअप, बाथ एंड बॉडी जैसी चीजों पर अप टू 50% ऑफ तो नहीं देंगे ना? कभी भी पेपर को आपने ऐसे कट नहीं करना है, ऐसे कट करना है. ओके, आज की क्लास के लिए इतना ही. बाकी आसमान है नीला क्यों, पानी गीला गीला क्यों, हम कल सीखेंगे. तब तक अपनी क्रिएटिविटी का टैब ऑन रखें.
Yeah. So if you go and watch her content also, she sticks very clearly to what her original voice is, right? Which is why you will see the skit has nothing to do with what the category actually talks about. And that's the beauty of a lot of creators who actually do this very interestingly, right? If you check travel bloggers, if you check travel bloggers who advertise cars, right? They know nothing about cars, right? At the end of the day, they are at the end of the day travel bloggers or fashion bloggers or lifestyle bloggers. What works for them is basically them traveling in that car to get to a certain place, which is why the story sort of the car becomes a vehicle to lend them to get to a certain place. Or there's a I was actually at a meta workshop a while around 2 to 3 weeks back, where they actually showed us an example of this guy who's a musician who actually who was actually invited to a launch a new car at an expo. And he created this reel using the sounds of the cars, sounds of the opening of the door, the starting of the revving of the engine, the changing of the gears, the shuffling back of the seats. He used that because he was a musician. He used those sounds and he created an actual track for the car, and it's brilliant because it worked in both favors. And he's a musician, right? He's not going to tell you about what's the mileage of the car and how much it does, but he used interestingly the device of the car sort of and the the medium of music to tell you the story through it, right? And that's how it becomes important also to leverage the creators strong points, right? And this is something even Meta stresses a lot on, right? Is to say that leverage the creator's voice and sort of do it. The second example we'll actually play is, I don't know if you guys have heard of Duolingo, but Duolingo is actually an app which sort of allows you to learn different languages. Very big abroad, a huge TikTok account, and they actually have a mascot, right, which is their icon, which is the Duolingo owl, right? So if you see the Duolingo owl also, what they've done is to make content out of this. They've actually made this a life-size mascot. Mascots are cute, right? I mean, we've all seen it. We've all gone to malls and stuff and seen someone dress up as a Mickey Mouse and being very happy, right? So, but how do you use this to actually bring the USP of your app, right? And they've given this mascot an entire personality. They've given this mascot because the Duolingo owl is this very brash kind of personality which hates typos, right? So you can play the video and then we'll talk more about this also. So if you see this, right, it's basically a place where there are a lot of typos, right? It's momos is being spelled as mom, right?
Yeah.
If you go to the channel also, and unfortunately we don't have TikTok here, but if you would see the Duolingo owl in the US also, which was started by this person who was managing the social media, you see this owl in general is a very brash character, right? It's not very, it's not this very cutesy owl. Looks very cute, but has this, right? So all the videos that they do are of this owl sort of intruding someone's space, or going and correcting English in like a restaurant. There was another reel which I didn't add, but it's this owl basically in a restaurant, and you can see he's covering something, and he walks away. And as you walk, you see the menu panned in, and all the errors have been corrected on the menu, right? All the misspelled of dishes names. Because again, at the end of the day, Duolingo is helping you improve, your English speaking skills, your spellings, all of that, right?
Yeah.
So they found an interesting way to bring that as part of the stories they tell through their content, right? And you see, you don't need a lot of context to understand this, right? You see this, okay, fine. Why is this owl correcting people's grammars? You will go and check out the platform. You understand what the the brand is all about, right? So again, this is one format. I think the next one is one of the easiest, I think, to create, which is as I am speaking about, which is basically using, screenshots or snippets from different things to tell a story. What is interesting here is, again, as I was mentioning, you can use dialogues. You see how they've used text over here across a diverse range of shows and films to convey a message, right? And it will talk to the consumer. Why? Because it's rooted again in a simple consumer insight, right? Of which is affection for people, right? So you can play this and also read what's happening on the screen while it happens. That's it. That's the video. That's it, right? But again, you see how the whole idea of liking something else but also liking you comes into play through the entire story, right? If you see the first frame also, it gets your attention because of that 4 split thing on which you have copy paste as part of it, and then
Yeah.
you have the snippets from each show, right? None of these shows are connected in any way, right? But you choose,
Yeah, yeah,
you
they're
could
very
tie them
different.
together. You could tie them together because you have a common rooted inside as part of it, and you see the copy also flows very interesting, like a poem, right? Of sorts. It's almost like a poem. I like chai, but I like you. I like rains, but I like you. I like dance, but I like you, right? So it flows as sort of that, right? So poetry surprisingly became a part of this piece also. So again, and when brands are doing a lot online, if you ever go, you can obviously just like spot, the entire pattern as to how they keep changing and doing interesting things. So yeah, that's
Awesome.
reels, I guess.
Thank you. Very nice. I'm going to again, if anybody in the audience has any questions, please do ask because we are 10 minutes away from closing.
Oh yeah, you had 10 minutes away. I keep get carried away with these videos. Then uh,
Yeah.
we'll quickly just skim over the digital ones. I think we spoke in depth about digital, right? And I said it's the easier to spot a trend. I
Yeah.
think on the left side is the Ambuja cement ad by Khali, which I don't know if a lot of people have seen or not. We can just play the first 30 seconds of this video. We don't have to play the entire thing.
घर एक स्वर्ग होता है, जैसे चाहे रो जियो, लेकिन मेरे साथ ऐसा नहीं था।
बड़ा प्यारा बेटा है खली, बस कभी कभी अपनी ही ताकत नहीं समझ पाता।
जिस ताकत ने मेरे को दुनिया भर में मान सम्मान दिलाया, वही ताकत मेरी प्रॉब्लम बन गई। कभी सोचता था मैं अगर मैं औरों की तरह होता, पर मेरी माँ कहती थी नहीं बेटे, तू स्पेशल है। और ऐसा ही चलता रहा। अपने आप को मैं हेल्पलेस फील करता था। फिर एक दिन मौसी ने बताया अंबुजा सीमेंट से घर बना लो। उसके बाद पता चला घर पर रहने का मजा है।
Oh, that's a great ad. I have never
Yeah.
seen that, but that's a great ad. What a great.
One of my favorites actually was done a
Yeah.
couple of years ago. One of the first ad actually which Khali was a part of, which he actually came out and did this very because people are not really used to seeing him in ads and stuff like that, but he did this as part of one of the first campaigns which they ran. And again, the ad as such, even if you watch it, how it transpires, you see there's a story running as part of it, right? It introduces Khali as who he really is, which is this character who's been seen as this big bulky wrestler, and shows how the brand easily is a seamless fit in, because you're selling cement at the end of the day, right?
Yeah.
You're selling a category which is not so mass, which is used by not people are not go and mix cement and use them by cells, right? But it's one of the most interesting ways of doing it. Yeah, someone commented also, Asmita commented and said it also. But yeah, I think you guys get the gist of how the story flowed, right? You saw the beginning, you saw the middle, which you saw the different ways of how he was not able to sort of go what is really life, and you saw the penny drop moment, which you saw the Ambuja cement part come in its place. But yeah, I think we can go to the next one. So we don't need to play that. I don't know which the
It
next
takes a
ad
few
is.
seconds, so I'll switch
Oh,
this one up.
this is a Google ad. Just play the first 30
Just
seconds of this.
say, Mummy talks.
Alex? Alex? Alex?
Hello, you.
This is a miracle rescue that all 13 members of the soccer team are out of the cave.
He turns into a superhero set on feeding as many homeless people as possible.
This election, we've seen historic voter turnout.
An all-Asian cast. There's nothing more empowering. Chance to go right up into it. Yes!
It'll be alright.
Yeah, so if you see, I mean, the entire video, I mean, you can share it with the team later so everybody can sort of see it, but the entire video flows with the idea of aspect of good, right? You see how, and they've used videos of what people have uploaded online, right? Content that's actually been created outside. So they've used that and they've used it as an interesting form to tie it all together. The idea being what people searched for. And Google does this year after year. The one that they did for COVID was very powerful because it actually spoke about how, you know, the world was changing and what people were going through, right? But I picked this one because it had a more concrete form of how the word good was used to tell stories, right? So again, using footage, using existing pieces, stories can be told in multiple ways. I showed you, I haven't picked, a direct ad of two people talking because I'll show you that in the next example. But you see how even Nike, when they did an ad recently of using montage and creating, montage of different sports events, and they created an ad from that as well. So go and check it out online. So, formats are, very easy to play with once you sort of, get into the idea of what your story is going to be from start to end. Your goodness being the hook. But yeah, you can go to the next one. So actually we can, I'll just show you this one. This was actually something I wrote at TDT when I was there. It's actually done for Hershey's. Hershey's was powering one of the IPs that TDT ran called Butterflies, in which you did human stories, right? You did these engaging human stories. The brand obviously had to be an integral part of the story. It did not have to be a by the way integration as part of it. This story in particular, I won't tell you what the actual hook or the moment. I'll have to unfortunately tell you what the hook or the moment is, but you guys can go and watch it in your spare time. It's basically this man who's preparing for an interview, and you'll see this girl on the opposite end is helping her train him for it, right? It turns out that she's actually his father-in-law, right? Who's planning, and he's planning to get back to work after years, right? It's been years since he basically is trying to get back to work after a long time. He's trying to prep for an interview of sorts, and she's helping him train for it, right? As the story progresses, you realize how their dynamics in their entire relationship are. What I want you to skip to is to the last section of the video where you see, so basically throughout this video, you will notice this man who's obsessed with Hershey's chocolates, gobbling it down constantly, right? So the brand is obviously something that he's obsessed with. He's eating constantly through the go. But if you go through the last 1 minute of the film, which you can just skip to and reach probably at the end, if you can just go to that, I'll tell you where to stop. Yeah. So she's upset with him. So she's upset with him because he's eating this constantly, right? And he tries offering this to her once in the middle of the film, but she says no. I know I'm explaining this film right now because we don't have time. I don't want to go through this film. The film is long because you've got to be able to sit through a 7.5 minute film. But if you see this moment also, she actually says "Ye nahi, wo wala." Right, so play it, Fabio.
अरे भाई कब से तुम्हारे पीछे पड़ा हूँ?
Right. Cheers.
So if you see the cheers that just happened, it became a visual mnemonic for actually the chocolate across the board, right? They wanted to use and create, a visual representation of how the chocolate is so tiny, right? The packet is large, but the chocolate is so tiny. How do you make the chocolate an integral part of the movement of the characters, right? So the chocolate actually became a cheers mnemonic, and we did 5 films across different relationships with different characters as part of it. And every film had the characters doing cheers with the chocolate. So it became a repeat visual mnemonic because the idea was to obviously say how, you make the moment sweeter with Hershey's, right? So this was the penny drop moment of the film, and I skipped the main penny drop moment, so you can go watch it later. But the chocolate becomes an integral part of the conversation, right? Now you can play it and slightly towards the end where you see this man running and going during the interview. You can play it from here. I think there's barely any seconds remaining.
वैसे पापा टाइम क्या हुआ?
नहीं हम इंटरव्यू के लिए लेट हो जाएंगे। आप लेट हो जाएंगे इंटरव्यू के लिए।
अरे 5 मिनट के बाद में जाते हैं।
नहीं ऑनलाइन इंटरव्यू के लिए कोई लेट नहीं हो सकता। काम।
अरे फोन पे नहीं दे सकते इंटरव्यू।
नहीं वैसे भी आपको कैमरा ऑन करने में 5 मिनट लगेगा। काम जल्दी कोट पहनो। रिमेंबर जो रिहर्स किया था वैसे कर।
1 मिनट।
अब क्या हुआ? पापा लेट हो जाओगे आप।
आ रहा हूँ।
Yes. They say the obsession with the chocolates is too much that he'll come back to take it again, right? So the brand was made a part of movements rather than just being this blatant thing out there which is being randomly consumed for no reason, right? So again, there was another film also which was a Chocosimo film. We didn't play that, but you can probably share the link with the rest also to see how. And that was a film which was done for Cornetto Chocosimo. They launched the film with the 3 films that we had made for TDD. The film I had written was the first film of the series, which had Shantanu Maheshwari, who you might have seen in Gangubai Kathiawadi and a lot of Dil Dosi Dance back in the day. So he was part of the film along with Rashmi Agrekar, and the film again has these 2 characters who sort of how the ice cream becomes an integral part of their conversations between these 2 friends also. So this is, there are multiple ways to do it, right? If you see here how the brand became an integral part of the conversations that were happening. And I think we just have one section remaining, right? After which we can end, because I think we've taken too much time for people.
No. Which one is this?
You can just go to the next slide. I think on the deck.
Yeah.
Next slide. Yeah. So this, I think, is the last section, which I thought we'll just touch upon, since we briefly have like 1 or 2 minutes that we can sort of talk about, which is using platform integration, right? If you can, please do share the link that I have added as part of the deck with everybody over here. So basically, back in 2015, Honda had launched a new car called the Honda CR-V. They had a black variant, they had a red variant, and they created a dual-sided film, which was run on YouTube. So basically, back then, if you went on YouTube and you watched, this film, there was a button over there which appeared, which had the letter R on it, right? And if you could either access it from your keyboard and press R, or you could access it on your phone and press R. And when you pressed R, you saw frame by frame different side of the same story, right? You can play this video. You can just watch the first 10 seconds, and you'll notice when you pressed R on YouTube, this actually changed and showed you a different side of the story. So yeah. What you're seeing right now also is basically someone pressing R during the film. This was basically what was built on YouTube. Now they've removed that functionality and feature. But if you pressed R on YouTube back then, you could actually see a different side of it. And let me show you this live as to how it happens. If you see the deck, can you open that link which is on the deck? Which is under. I mean, we can actually watch it happen live. So you can actually just open the link, which is under the film over there, and just cast that link.
Just hold on. I need.
Yeah, sure, no problem. You want me to do it?
I'm almost there.
Okay, cool. You're on a laptop, I'm assuming, right?
I am on a laptop, yes.
Okay, great. So you can tell people when you're about to press R and then show them the other side of the film.
Awesome. Just give me 1 second. Awesome. I will just share my screen. Can you see my screen?
Yeah, great. Okay, so basically, I told you what the gist is, right? When you're about to press R now, just tell everybody else so that they know you're going to change them, and press it and hold it and keep it. Okay, we can't hear it, but I don't know what's wrong. But yeah, it's fine.
Sorry about
Actually, no problem. I'm going to also put the link for everybody else in the thing so they
Yeah,
can
I'm just going to paste the link here.
yeah, they can experience it in their own time whenever they have uh,
Yeah.
yeah, great. Okay. But yeah, basically you understood the gist, right? You could go there, you just press R, which if you're on a laptop, and it actually switched and showed you the same frame by frame version of a different story. The daytime story was basically of a father dropping his two kids to school. The nighttime story was the same person who plays the father playing an undercover cop with two people at the back who are robbers, and he's the getaway driver. The guy playing the father is the getaway driver, and it was a great ad. Won a lot of awards. You could go and check it out, watch it in your own spare time. And yeah, that's one example. And the second example that I actually put was basically a Spotify ad. Spotify is again great for using platform as an integration to tell an interesting story. What they had done, and IKEA as a brand had done this actually, was basically
Ambient
using
noise
a lot
playlists
of
on Spotify.
yeah, I can watch this. So basically, a lot of brands, a lot of playlists on Spotify were used by parents to actually put their kids to sleep. But the ads in the middle were these loud, blaring ads. People screaming, shouting, selling cars, bikes, this, that, other things. IKEA, what they actually did was basically created these hush hush ads, which were ads basically whispered, saying that we've tailored this ad specifically so your toddler does not wake up while they're sleeping. And in case you need something for them, you can purchase it from IKEA. There were these whisper ads, right? Won a lot of awards because it used the platform interestingly, right? And IKEA as a furniture brand using Spotify, which is an audio platform to tell an interesting story, was again using the platform to the best advantage, right? And again, you can probably share this, link with the people on the chat so they can watch this as well. But it was an interesting campaign because these two that I've shown you actually use the platform to leverage the ability of storytelling and tell it better. And yeah, I think that's more or less what I sort of had for today's session. But yeah,
Awesome. Thank you. And we'll definitely share all the links and this recording with everyone who registered but may not have made it today.
no problem.
One last question, I think, Joel, before you go. So, what's in store for the future? What do you see growing, and what do you see not maybe making it forward?
I mean, it's difficult to comment on what I don't see making forward because I would have to have data to back both of the statements as to what would make it forward and what would not. What I definitely think is an interesting time to see is how brands are slowly moving from the traditional way of doing things and telling stories to sort of um, adapting to newer formats as to what's happening on the internet and trying to use that to leverage and tell stories better. So I am very interested in seeing how, especially celebrities and influencers, are not used in the traditional way, but how they've been, adapted and used in a certainly, for the lack of better words, to adapt to the platform versus to adapt to who they are as personalities and people. So I am very interested to see how that comes out because I think it's slowly started and you see it happening across the board with a lot of content collaborations with a lot of brands who are now entering into that space.
Yeah.
I'm only also very interested to see the innovations that happen in terms of at least platform level and how brands leverage that further. I know there are certain brands that have already done it, but I'm always very excited when an innovation comes out, which does something very differently, right? So I'm very interested to see how a medium is used to tell a different kind of a story versus using it in its existing traditional form. So yeah, I think, but it's very hard to say what will make it and what will not because I think platforms change every day and so do people's tastes. But yeah,
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much. I had a great time talking to you, and we've got
likewise.
a lot of great insights. We will be putting up a whole detailed article on this as well as this recording, so look out for that. Thank you
Yes.
so much for your time,
Thank you so
Joel.
much. Thank you so much for having me. Bye, guys. See you.
Bye. Thank you so much. Take care. Bye bye.